Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Alabama Care. This is part of our weekly broadcast series here, and I am with Mrs. Susan Ellis and Mrs. Allison Haynes of People First, and I will go ahead and let them introduce themselves.
Okay, Susan Ellis. I'm currently the director here at People First of Alabama. We're a statewide organization. We have chapters all over the state, but our state office is here in Vestavia. We are funded by the Department of Mental Health, and sometimes we have grants that also help us sustain our activities. Our chapters vary from area to area on the things that they work on. Usually they have monthly meetings and then do coordinated activities that the state office coordinates. So we'll get into some other things. This is Allison Haynes, who is my right-hand lady, and I think it would be good for you to tell everybody a bit about your experience living with a disability.
Okay, as Susan said, I'm Allison Haynes. I'm the outreach coordinator here, assisting Susan, and I have cerebral palsy, and one of the things that I have that when it comes to my disability, there are some limitations to what I can do, like driving. I don't really drive on the interstate. I can drive on the interstate, but I don't. And so I have to just kind of be more cautious when it comes to driving my routes, and also with just normal activities when it comes to working. There are so many things that can be a two-handed job. And I have CP on my right side. It affects my entire right side of my body. And so I basically use just one hand, and if there's something that involves a two-handed job, I'll either ask Susan for help, or the Alabama Department of Rehab Services has actually accommodated me with certain things that actually helps me out on the job, such as dragging, which if you type 35 words per minute, it can triple your speed.
Really?
Uh-huh.
I've never heard of dragon before. I'd like to know more about that here a little bit later.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Another one is an electric stapler. I can staple with my left hand, but if we're in a hurry or something, and there's a lot of stuff to do, I'll just use my electric stapler. So those are some of the things that actually help me, and it's quite challenging when it comes to having a disability, because you never know what you can do, but at the same time I feel like really, for myself personally, God shows me what I can do, and He shows me what I cannot do, and He also guides me and helps me if there's something hard for me. He helps me to overcome what is hard and shows me how to do it in a good way. So,
and I'm just going to add a couple of things because I think it's instructive for all people and their families who live with a developmental disability. Allison is a fabulous example of somebody who's had great family support and has built a network of people beyond her family that care enough about her to do things. She's got neighbors, she's got friends through People First, she's got her church community where she's a valued member. She's not just looked on, she's somebody with a disability. She's a active, vital, valued member of the community. She lives independently. Her folks don't live, they live like an hour away. But that only came about with a real team of support. And it was done through informal, not formal kinds of things, but just so not everybody has access. In fact, we learned that in our state, there's only 25% of people with intellectual disabilities that have services. And there's a good number of people who are on the waiting list for services, but that means that 75% of people have to figure things out without services. So that's one of the things that People First likes to help people figure out complex issues and be there for them to empower them to access the life that they want. And Allison, is, like I said, is a good example of somebody who's being able to access the life that she wants with social opportunities, with spiritual opportunities. She works here a few hours a week, that she also volunteers every week for another disability support organization. She has paid opportunities at United Ability, which a lot of people will know about. She fills in as a receptionist there occasionally. And then she also works paid for another church.
Mountain Road Baptist Church.
Right.
Yeah.
So she puts together a lot every day, and takes care of all her menu planning and shopping, and she is a real inspiration. So I thought that would be good for people to see the potential and being part of organized self-advocacy, which that's what we call our the individuals who live with disabilities, is we call them self-advocates. People First works with people primarily who have developmental disabilities, which means that their condition started before the age of 22 and is significant and lifelong. And it could be somebody who experiences no learning problems, but just has physical or mobility, sensory, that kind of thing. Or it could be somebody who doesn't use words to communicate and needs, lots and lots of assistance, has very complex needs. So what we try to do is make sure that our members are knowledgeable about resources through services and not through services, and ways to develop answers to individualized kinds of problems. And through them, then we're able to help families, because research shows that most people with developmental disabilities live within the context of their families, not services. So we want to empower all of those, the support system for people with developmental disabilities. I think I said we're funded from the Department of Mental Health. And so we work and collaborate. It's a wonderful collaboration. Right now, our state is on the verge of implementing new rules related to Medicaid, which will allow a lot more integration into the community. So the supports will move from segregated supports to integrated supports, which takes a lot of creativity and a lot of individualization to make it work. So our members, we have our state president, lives in Montgomery, actually Millbrook, but she's working today. I really wanted her to come today, but she is working, and we're grateful for all the employment that's another big issue that People First works on. So Montgomery is another place that we really want to have a thriving chapter. We're working hard, because that gives us an opportunity to have people there to do some of the education that our legislators need about the lives of people with developmental disabilities, which ends up becoming legislation that affects our family members. So, by the way, I am also a parent of an adult with a developmental. He has Down syndrome, and he is 36. And because our family had access to information, he started his school career in a regular setting and ended his school career in a regular setting. Even though he has a significant intellectual disability, he never went to a segregated class. He never went to a resource room. The services came to him, which meant that at the age of 17, he was able to be successful in a career that he still adores. He's an entertainer at Chuck E. Cheese. So he is in the middle of his 19th year working at a regular paid job, which, again, just like Allison, gives him access to a network of people just like everybody else's career. And his career, he he values himself as a person with that career. That's a huge part of it. And he has a committed relationship with his girlfriend. He has a great life. And he has a Medicaid waiver, which helps him, and he directs it. So he chooses how he spends his time with his staff person. And mostly it's going in the community. She takes him to an art class. It's a regular art class at Forrestal Art, but very generous and welcoming. And he goes to work out. They go shopping. They make sure that his space within our house, he has the lower level of our house, is taken care of. And he sometimes helps with medical appointments, that kind of thing. So that's what we want. People First is basically a civil rights organization for people with developmental disabilities. We are focusing right now on recruitment of youth and youth leadership and training. We have created a wonderful handbook that's available online. Right now, it's not linked to our website, but anybody can get it electronically by reaching out at state@peoplefirstal.net, which is also our website, peoplefirstal.net. And the phone number's on that too, and we can help you out with that. So the Young Emerging Leaders program is the one that really works with youth ages 16 to 26. But if you're a little younger and you want to, and you're a little older and you want to, you're welcome to participate in that. We meet every other month for like a seminar, and we usually have a specific topic, or we'll have speakers come in. And we've discovered that all of the learning for all of us, we do better when it's experiential learning. Mm-hmm. So we do things in the community as part of the learning process. We have small groups, and we do activities that are related to the learning, because that's really, and we do tons of mentoring. Allison and many of our other members are the teachers. And then when we go around the state, and anybody that wants a presentation on any of these topics related to disability history, disability legislation, professionalism, employment, all of those issues are in that handbook, but they're all tied to presentations that our members give.
Now, those presentations, do you notice they're normally more one-on-one for just one family or one individual, or do you normally have like a group of 5 families or 20? How does that look?
Okay, since we have chapters, the chapters can decide what kind of program that they want to do, but again, the target person is the individual with DD. So the presentations that we give are usually at schools, mm-hmm. or at there's programs called Project Search that our state has, I think, 11 locations now. So sometimes we'll come in and do a self-advocacy component of that. So it's usually to organizational presentations.
Gotcha.
So agencies that serve people with DD will bring us in. We have had a wonderful project called Keys to the Community, and we have done now probably 10 presentations around the state to folks who are in those kind of segregated settings right now, the rehabilitation programs. So, like I said, everything's changing. People are moving out. So that presentation, it's a series of 3, helps people understand what it is to participate in the community. If you've been isolated from the community, if you grew up going to public school but you were only in segregated classes, and then you never experience a life out, in the community, then you really haven't been exposed to it. So agencies are now doing that. They are intentionally giving people who are in those rehabilitation programs opportunities to experience the community, so the training sort of prepares them for that. It's like, what are we talking about? Is like the first. And then the second one is thinking about what you might like to do in the community. And it might be employment, but it might also be something fun and or productive, like learning a new skill.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know this isn't it's not like you just go and you have one presentation or one family hears it, and it doesn't change overnight. This is a process. And you spoke about your son's process, and Mrs. Haynes, you've had a process, but it's not like you went from the education system and kind of living not how you wanted to the next day everything was beautiful and the flowers were blooming. How long does that take, and how do you is it something that you continue to work on?
You do continue to work on it. You're going to continue to work on it for the rest of your life. I mean, truthfully, in one of the life experiences that I had growing up, I was actually in a school system growing up. I was in the first grade, but for myself, just because of my cerebral palsy. Part of my one of the symptoms of my CP is a learning disability, and I was unable to really. I had a hard time in math.
I did.
For some reason I have this memory of just not being able to understand that 1 + 1 = 2, and my parents, what they did was they looked into the special needs. I forget what the proper name for is. The school system.
Special education.
Thank you. Special education system. They didn't like what they saw, so they took me out and they started homeschooling me. And my parents worked with me for a long time, and really I give credit to God. I was able to get my high school degree in May of 2000.
Congratulations.
But I mean, just it was a long process, and I continue to learn, and I still have a hard time. But it's going to be something that even whether it's schoolwork or something or learning a new job or something like that, it's a constant daily process that just you're going to work on for the rest of your life.
And my son puts it this way. He says, it's never going to go away, so you may as well love it. And that's exactly right. No matter what your needs are, instead of running away from it, it's better to embrace it. I always think acceptance is great, right? But we're human beings. We need to be appreciated. So my belief is very strongly that no matter what level of ability, our communities are better because your aunt exists, my son exists, Allison exists. People with conditions add quality to our community. So there should be a level of appreciation. Not to mention we put a lot of people to work, right? All the special ed teachers and therapists and all that kind of stuff. And they do it out of love because they want to see people progress. But embracing it means you embrace that lifestyle. As long as I'm living, I'm going to be part of my son's. I have other children too who don't. Obviously, we love them and we'll be there to support them, just like my parents did for me and my sisters. But we all know that our son with a disability is going to need more steady and more supports. So we're always looking ahead to that next stage of life, making sure that things are secure, that he can lead the life that he chooses. And that's what People First wants for everybody. So to live a life of value where people see them as competent human beings. So we kind of stray from anything that's going to make our family members look incompetent.
Tell me how you mean by that.
Well, being transparent to somebody, again, about their condition. It's not helpful for a young person who is living the life of somebody with a disability, and parents sometimes don't think their child is able to understand that they're different. I see it every day. No matter what level, what your cognitive abilities are, you know that you're not up walking around like everybody else is.
Kind of the elephant in the room.
Yeah, So be truthful and say, yeah, you have this condition, it's called that. That's part of who you are. It's not all of who you are. We have that great label, jars, not people. And this gives, that attitude gives everybody, it empowers you really to be seen and see yourself as somebody who is valued. So you start at the very beginning having those aspirations of, I'm going to have a career. I'm going to have a life in the community that I choose. I'm going to have friends. And again, the disability rights part of it comes in for everybody with a developmental disability to be able to live, love, work, and play in their community. And that's a hard thing, just like you're saying. It's a constant, but that's why we need organized self-advocacy. And the organization is run by a board of directors, all of who have a developmental disability, and there's a variety of conditions, and we want to be that way. We want people who have more complex cognitive needs to be part of our leadership. They need support to do that, but they can be presenters. All they need is the right supports to be presenters and to share their life. That will help with legislators to be able to see the person that's experiencing the condition and hear it from them, and not just a parent or a provider of services, but that's much more impactful. And so that's what we're about in terms of leadership, is giving everybody a voice in the community. And this is my favorite thing, right?
No pity.
That's exactly right.
If you can't see it, Mrs. Ellis is wearing a badge that says pity and then a line right through it. So no pity around here.
Exactly. Because pity doesn't help, right? Viewing people as competent, and a huge effort for many years in our state and around the country is for employment to be the first service that people might need supports for. That's even coming down into the schools now. In the 9th grade in our state, vocational rehabilitation starts working with students with developmental disabilities or any learning disabilities, and helps them get better prepared for competitive employment. So we're talking about people who in the recent past have not been viewed as competent for employment. So now we're looking at, and there's lots and lots of ways, if people have confidence, right, if the school administrators and teachers and vocational rehabilitation counselors have the same view that everybody has some competence. So you have to find the right match, right? It's the interest and the skills where they cross. That is where you go for paid employment. So it's a huge effort for our Department of Mental Health to have everybody who's actually in services be paid employees. And that helps our community.
Yeah.
Because they're receiving services, but they're also paying taxes.
And you mentioned that earlier, is it really affects the whole community, the working community there and everybody. And that was something that Mr. Richards talked about last week at Taziki's, is it really, it makes the whole thing better for everybody around.
That's exactly right. It makes the working experience for his staff that don't have disabilities better. It makes networking. Many of those people have family members with a developmental disability, so it gives them empowerment to say, oh yeah, I know so-and-so, he's been working at our place for 10 years and he can do all these things. So that's the gift of inclusion. My son graduated from high school in 2001, and now his generation of cohorts are having families, and guess what? They're having children with Down syndrome and CP, and just like everybody else. And they can look back and say, hey, yeah, I knew Matthew. He was a great guy, and he's working, and he has friends, he has a life. So it's not so tragic. So families aren't, when you experience, that's the gift of inclusion. That, obviously it helps the individual have a better education, but it also helps our community have a better education.
Now, Mrs. Haynes, we spoke briefly there about getting a job, but it's not where your skills and where your passion cross. You kind of still have to go and figure that out. It's not like your first job's going to be your last job. Have you gone through a series of finding out where you best fit and what you like to do in different jobs?
Well, actually, when I started working for the same school that I graduated from, which was Crossroads Christian School, I remember just with some of the gifts that God has given me, just finding out these gifts. And I remember thinking, Lord, I want to help people. And then fast forwarding to United Ability, when I started working for them as a receptionist substitute, it became like, I really want to work with people that have the same type of disability as I do. I mean, just that are that's similar to my own disability. And so since then, that's what I've always wanted to be, and to be someone who is like a teaching assistant that works with people with disabilities. Before Susan called me in to tell me, hey, would you like to become the outreach coordinator, I was looking for a lot of teaching assistant jobs in the school system, but unfortunately that didn't really work out. But
It's fortunate for us, though.
yeah, it was fortunate for us because I'm going to say this: God led me to Susan, and truthfully, I feel like People First has been my dream job. Now, that's not to say that God's going to not continue to move me on somewhere else someday, but just to be able to work with Susan, to work with those who like with Young Emerging Leaders, Keys to the Community, all those things, all those programs that we have, I'm working with people one-on-one with disabilities that are similar to my own.
Mm-hmm.
She's also the newly elected president of the chapter we have in Jefferson County.
Oh.
And it's a fairly new chapter.
Another congratulations.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But why don't you tell everybody about what it's like, how the chapter functions? Because that would be a way for people to really see what you do as a chapter.
We earlier, Susan told us that Susan said that we are a self-advocacy organization that teaches people with disabilities how to advocate for themselves and to know their rights and responsibilities so that they can have more choices in life and be more independent. And we as a chapter, we take particular topics and we try to teach them self-advocacy skills, assertiveness skills. I've actually done a PowerPoint presentation teaching about how to speak assertively versus aggressive and passively.
Mm.
And
I think a lot of people could use that training.
yeah, and as a
That's how she got into doing the training, because her vocational rehabilitation. But see, that's so good, right? Because you learn through teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So she's become better at those skills by teaching others those skills.
And so we will pick topics every month and just talk about, again, just in short words, their rights, their responsibilities. We'll do fun things. We're actually going to have a Christmas party this Friday. We'll go out. We'll actually combine with other chapters like the Blount County chapter and some others, and we'll go to Montgomery or Tuscaloosa or somewhere else and stand up for our rights. Like I think last year I remember us going up to Montgomery and we stood up for our rights as far as independent living and some other
And
other
the school
rights.
board issue about integration.
That's
in
right,
schools.
the school board, yes.
And that was a big campaign that we did. We have a Facebook page, People First of Alabama, and we used that. We reached out to people to say, send us your little clips on your iPhone, and we put them all together and made a YouTube video, and that YouTube video was shown at the school board because one of the school board members had made a comment about how couldn't we start a special academy, setting us back another 50 years.
Yeah,
So we had an immediate response. That also is another thing that People First does, is we collaborate with other disability rights organizations. And the outcome of that issue on integration that was at the school board created a new coalition Disability Advocates for Alabama Public Schools, which is a Facebook page. We try to disseminate information about, we just completed our second annual in Alabama. The governor approved the first week of December as Inclusion Schools Week.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So that was an effort that this new coalition, which wasn't even a coalition at that point, right? It was a reaction to, but being able to pull that all together. There's disability rights and resources around here, and there's independent living centers that are affiliated with them all over the state. There's ADAP, Alabama Disabilities Advocacy Program, which is similarly funded as the Council on Developmental Disabilities that funds this program. Mm-hmm. And then in every state has a DD Council and something similar to what ADAP is. And then they also have a University Center on Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. Those are the three DD federally funded sources that we interact with. Many of our members are on the ADAP Council, the DD Council. We collaborate with the DD Council for funding these new projects. And then we also participate with the University Center, which is actually in our state at UAB.
Now, People First is not just in Alabama. It is nationwide. Tell me a little bit about how People First started in Alabama and really grew.
Okay. So in the late 80s, and of course, if anybody's listening that has better information, add it. But
please, you're welcome to interact in the chat. If there are links that you think would be helpful to other members in the chat, please post it there and collaborate. So
yes. So in the late 80s, it was really the ARC of Alabama wanted to get more self-advocacy training for the people that they serve. Mm-hmm. So that's really was the impetus for starting a chapter of People First. The national organization is called Self Advocates Becoming Empowered, SABE, and they can be reached at sabeusa.org. You have to put the USA in there because there's another SABE, okay? sabeusa.org. We are so proud. One of the biggest accomplishments our state chapter has ever done is we just hosted the national conference of SABE here in Birmingham.
Oh, really?
Yes, so this was the biggest, it's the only national disability organization that has ever met in Alabama. So there were over 700 attendees, and then there was another 100 to 200 volunteers that participated in a 3-day event with national speakers and workshops, and all of the workshops were led by people with developmental disabilities, which is what our chapters do a lot of. We invite speakers. Sometimes the speakers have DD, and sometimes the speakers are our members that are working on a particular issue.
I think that's really big because if I want to learn something and somebody's trying to teach me how to do it, but I know that they've never gone through it themselves, there's a disconnect there. It's you haven't, like if I want somebody to teach me how to set up microphones and all they know how to do is draw microphones, it's like there's a disconnect there. I'm going to look for somebody that's been through the experience that I'm about to experience.
So my role, not having a developmental disability, is to support what their decisions are and give them good advice. We call them advisors. Mm-hmm. So every chapter has an advisor. And some chapters need a lot of support, and some, Jefferson County, they make their own flyers, they post them on in emails, they add, they keep an email list. A lot of what Allison does, and that's why it's called outreach, is go to events anywhere everywhere there might be some family members or individuals with disabilities. We make an attempt to be there all over the state, and we bring our materials. We're always trying to get people to have new chapters. We have a new chapter that's at the Helen Keller School in Talladega at the high school. We have a pretty new chapter on campus at the University of Alabama. Remember, not everybody with a DD has an intellectual disability. Mm-hmm. However, the University of Alabama also has a wonderful transition program where some of the high school students from that area are actually participating on campus doing University of Alabama things called crossing points. So they benefit, the crossing point students benefit, and if there's employees that have developmental disabilities, that's, again, organized self-advocacy. Being a great self-advocate is wonderful, but being part of organized self-advocacy means we can affect policy changes. We can empower more people to spread the word if you're part of an organized group. So utilizing Facebook, we do a little Twitter. We intend to do more Instagram, but getting more into social media. But we even have a presentation. One of our members, who's now at the University of Montevallo, has a wonderful presentation on social media. We have a how to use technology handbook that's electronic available, so you can learn, even if you have an intellectual disability, learn how to use a cell phone, social media, all that kind of stuff.
Now, you guys go around the state, and there are chapters in every region of the state. People First is local to you wherever you are. If you had to narrow down your target customer, someone that you find that you interact with the most and takes the most away from your interaction with them, at what stage in life or what age group is that individual? And I know you serve, like you said, really from high school all the way through, but where do you think is the most critical point to be involved with People First?
To be involved with self-advocacy, I would say, is, the real thing that we try to encourage. Whether or not you're actually in the organization is great, but learning those self-determination skills. And we have programs that affect toddlers, right? So teaching toddlers, especially toddlers with intellectual disabilities, because again, it's new to that family. If your child is 3 years old and been diagnosed with some significant disability, it's like, I'm picking out the clothes, I'm picking out the food. Whereas somebody who doesn't have that, it's sort of naturally. So this has to be intentional, giving young people and figuring out intentional opportunities for them to make choices on their own. Because what happens is, if you live your life kind of complacent and expecting people to do things for you,
you'll become dependent.
Absolutely, and that happens. It's unintentional from families and the education system, but it's pervasive. So we are doing a disservice. So we do a lot of advocacy to the education community to, again, presume competence. So when you get that little kid that has very significant learning and physical disabilities, don't wipe a lifetime in the community and a career off their list. That I told you about earlier, we now have an organization called TASH in our state. It's a national organization. You can check them out at tash.org. And our new state chapter is screening films called the Intelligent Lives. And the focus of that film is to show that IQs are nothing. They're really detrimental. Those IQ scores lead to limiting, and we need the opposite. We need people to have, again, if you presume competence and you have the highest expectations, and family members, people with disabilities need to be around people who have the highest expectations for them, because my experience is that people will live up to their lowest expectation, right, around people around them. So if people around them have high expectations, even to the point of people saying, well, that's never going to happen, who knows? What right do we have to set those limitations? We want to be giving real world, and that's why I'm talking about don't candy coat things. You don't want to devastate anybody either, but you want to be real to them and give them the opportunity to fit in where they like to fit in and follow their strengths.
I agree. We're getting a few phone calls here on the phone, and I've encouraged people to call in. Would you like to take a phone call?
Sure.
And then we can get back to a few other things. I believe got a phone call from a 334 area code, so Montgomery, and then the 205. I will call you back shortly after.
You have reached the voicemail box of
Somebody else.
That happens
Somebody
to me
else.
a lot.
You call somebody right back, and it's like, wait a second, what just happened? They're probably leaving a voicemail. But that really is a mental shift. They say you're the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with the most. And so if those people, here we have coming back.
Yeah,
Okay.
coming back.
To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail.
and so.
Hello, this is Alex. You're on air with Alabama Care.
Hey, Alex, it's Sophia and Myra. Hello, Susan. Hey,
Hello.
Hello. How are you doing today?
We're doing fine.
This is Alex. You're on
So if you would do me a favor, if you would turn down your computer's volume. We're getting a little feedback on the mic there.
So if you would do me a favor, if you would turn down your computer's volume.
Okay.
Okay, there we go.
We're getting a little on the mic there.
We'll make sure.
Okay.
Do you have? So thank you for calling in, Mrs. Whitted and Mrs. Banks. I know we tried to do this here in the last week or two, and so it's just coming through now.
Do you have? So thank you for calling in. This is Whitted and Mrs. Banks.
I think we still have a feedback loop
We tried to do this here in the last week.
on your end. Is it still going through there?
Yeah, I think we're just getting we hear you first and then we have to wait to respond or something.
Oh no, we'll just be on this phone call if you'd like, and then you can close down that web page that you're viewing on your phone or your computer, and then after this phone call, you could go back into that. But we'll just have this conversation. Is there anything you'd like to say or ask to Mrs. Ellis and Mrs. Haynes?
Yes, we're just calling to thank you, and we tuned in a few minutes ago, and we just want to thank them for all of the information that they're providing for families out there in radio land.
Well, please engage. So they can hear you right now. We're on the microphone. So we have Mrs. Myra Banks and Mrs. Sophia Whitted just saying thank you very much for everything that you guys do.
It is our ultimate pleasure. We really enjoy what we do.
Absolutely.
So thank you for calling in, and we will try and get the audio worked out there for next time call in. And is there anything else that we can do for you at this point?
That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, they say you're the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. And if those 5 people have very low expectations, what then? Then you're going to be low expectations, and where are you going to go from there? So a lot of what I see that you guys do, and I don't know if I'm in the right area, but is really empowering the individual, but also the community directly around them.
Right.
That seems like such a structure there that's needed.
Exactly.
Because I know for me, if I'm hanging around with people I shouldn't be hanging around, I'm going to go down that route. But if the people I'm hanging around with have high expectations for me and they're in places where I want to go, I'm more likely to get there.
Right. One of the new initiatives that we're working on is to do more community service projects that don't necessarily have to do with disability, right? So communicating with other, participating with other marginalized populations and being there. Allison organized participation in 2 events on one Saturday. One was at Kelly Ingram Park. It was a community day. Mm-hmm. So we're part of the community. So we wanted people to know we're part of the community. So we set up a table with materials about disability, even though it wasn't a disability event. There, people, all of us have some relationship to disability. At the same time, we did had a table at a community autism event, which was specific to people with disabilities. So we're trying to encourage our chapters and our members to look at how they can participate in the community. The Blount County chapter is kind of famous for that. So they do stuff like if there's a MLK Day kind of event, they're very visible in that. They're very visible at just community activities like Christmas events or holiday events, July 4th parades, all of those kinds of things, because again, people with disabilities are everywhere. That's what makes organizations like Publix and Taziki's, people know that because they have people that are that are visible disabilities. Some of our members have invisible disabilities. But when you want to go shop and honor a place that people can see that you're honoring people with disabilities. So we want to encourage that and make, like I said, make connections and collaborations. We had a wonderful event here in Birmingham before the national conference where we had grassroots organizations representing everything from the gay community, Black Lives Matters, the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, Lakeshore Foundation. We had all of those organizations come, and the Hispanic Adelante, Alabama, that works with, it really supports working people in the Hispanic community. And again, all of those organizations also have members with disabilities. So this is a way for them to find out more about us and how we can support their causes too.
I get it. I mean, you guys have been doing a ton of work here in the state, and you said it's from the 80s, really, is when it first started. So you guys are, I mean, your roots are deep here. So that's a very, very nice thing there. How should, you've talked about some